Back in the 90s, Carnage was one of the most popular comic book villains out there. He's a lean, mean killing machine with a red color scheme. But something that people often forget about, and/or overlook, is that the Carnage symbiote has actually bonded to all sorts of people over the years. And as someone who has read way too many Spider-Man comics, I'm here to break down the complicated web that is every Carnage ever. But as a heads up, I'm only going to be talking about the mainstream Marvel Comics universe. So for as much fun as characters like Aunt May or Doc Ock getting Carnage might be, I'll need to save them for a future video, which you should totally comment down below on if you'd like to see me talk about them. Before we hop in though, Keeps really loved the last Carnage video that I did, so they decided to sponsor this one as well. As you've no doubt heard by now, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they turn 35, which is where Keeps comes in. They're a subscription service that uses generic versions of FDA-approved medications for hair loss to make it easy and affordable to treat male pattern baldness. By working with a real licensed doctor over the internet, you can get the right treatment for you mailed directly to your door every 3 months, eliminating the needs for boring pharmacy pickups or doctor visits. But if you need to ever check in with your doctor with questions or concerns, then you can message them 24/7. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, then go to keeps.com/comicdrake or click the link in the description down below to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/comicdrake. Thank you very much, Keeps, but now let's get back to the video. Obviously, we have to start with the man that started it all, Cletus Kasady. Cletus is a serial killer that shared a cell with Eddie Brock, who was put in prison after losing the Venom symbiote. Eventually, Venom tracked Eddie down and busted him out, but left behind some residue that mixed with Cletus's blood, which gave birth to Carnage. Now souped up with a symbiote of his own, Kasady broke out and went on a killing spree, leaving the message "Carnage rules" written in blood wherever he went. Cletus and Carnage have the strongest bond out of any symbiote and their host, with Carnage literally being a part of his bloodstream. Because of this, every single time that Kasady and Carnage have been defeated or separated over decades and decades worth of comics, the two of them are reunited, as there is no possible way to truly pull them apart. No matter the distance or no matter how much damage either of them takes, Cletus and Carnage have proven time and time again that they will always be together to paint the town red. While locked up in the Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane, Kasady was watched over by its chief of security, John Jameson III. He's the son of J. Jonah Jameson, a former astronaut, and used to be a space werewolf. Because comics. In order to break Cletus out of the asylum, Carnage found a way to slip through the defenses and bond with John. However, Carnage was weak after being subjected to the cell's anti-symbiote defenses for so long. So if Carnage was going to spring Kasady from the asylum, it would need to merge with a much stronger host. Someone like, say, Spider-Man. But all of this was in the 90s, which is arguably the weirdest and most complicated era in all of comic history. So at this time, Peter Parker wasn't Spider-Man. This guy, Ben Reilly, was. He's a clone of Peter, but during the Clone Saga, which is one of the most infamous Spider-Man storylines of all time, Peter believed that he was the clone, moved to Portland, and let Ben take over as Spider-Man. Anyway, while trying to keep the infected Jameson at bay, Carnage bonded to Ben, becoming Spider-Carnage, which is one of the most 90s names ever made. Although he knew how to get the symbiote off, Ben didn't want to risk Carnage grabbing hold of someone else and wrecking more carnage, so Reilly tried to keep it at bay. While under the influence of the symbiote though, Ben's fear, rage, and anxiety were dialed up to 11, making him increasingly paranoid that he might actually be the clone all along. And he totally was. Carnage was constantly whispering in Ben's ear to kill Peter, so that he wouldn't come back from Portland and take over Ben's life. Even though Peter still had his whole life in order, and it was Ben who took on the new identity and started from scratch. Regardless, Ben was able to fight off Carnage's temptation, but his control was rapidly slipping, meaning that it was only a matter of time until Carnage fully took over the driver's seat. In an attempt to learn more about how to control Carnage, Ben broke into Ravencroft to talk to Kasady, but in all actuality, Carnage was pulling his strings, and was now powerful enough to smash through the cell's defenses and reunite with Cletus once again. A couple of years later, Carnage encountered the Silver Surfer, and the symbiote was so scared of him that he jumped off of Cletus and ran. See, many years ago, the Surfer came to a planet completely overrun with symbiotes, and as per his job, he brought Galactus along with him, who proceeded to devour the world. Since the symbiotes are a hive mind, they remembered the Silver Surfer, causing Carnage to take revenge for his ancestors. The Surfer went into the sewers where Carnage went into hiding, only to be ambushed by the symbiote, becoming the Carnage Cosmic. another one of the most 90s names ever made. Carnage tried its best to fully merge with the Surfer, but wasn't able to. So looking to take advantage of the situation, Spider-Man wanted to destroy the symbiote once and for all. But here's the thing. Kasady had cancer, and the only thing keeping him alive was his bond with Carnage. By destroying the symbiote, though, Spider-Man and the Silver Surfer would be condemning him to death, and not wanting their blood on his hands, even that of a superpowered mass murderer, the heroes make it back to Cletus and forcibly have Carnage rebond with his former host. But to prevent him from ever getting out, the Surfer encased him in a shell of silver, which was immediately forgotten about, since the next time that we saw Kasady, he was just chilling in his cell, and that tomb of silver has never been brought up again. Now, a few years later, Carnage was flown into space and torn in half by the Sentry. But because this is comic books that we're talking about, he, of course, came back to life. It turns out that Carnage was keeping Cletus alive in space, but just barely. His body was found by industrialist Michael Hall, who extracted fragments of the symbiote in order to create new cybernetic technology, such as Iron Man-like suits and a prosthetic arm for a doctor at Ravencroft. This was Dr. Tanis Nieves, and the sliver of Carnage inside her arm compelled her to seek out the rest of the symbiote to bond with it. This was short-lived, however, because Carnage then piloted Dr. Nieves' body to Kasady so that it could rebond with him. On top of that, Carnage left its child inside of her arm, eventually becoming the Doctor's very own symbiote, Scorn. Not too long after this, the United States government captured the Venom symbiote and just pumped it full of chemicals in order to give its host complete control over it, and to prevent Venom from fully bonding with the host. The end result was Agent Venom. Inspired by this, a villain named the Wizard, who has the ability to control people's minds, decided that he wanted to do the same with Carnage to create his own superior Carnage. Originally, the Wizard just wanted to control Cletus's mind, but recent events had left him effectively lobotomized, so there was no mind left to control. He then tried to take over the symbiote's mind, but wasn't able to as well. The only option left was to bond Carnage to a new host and then control that person's mind. So the Wizard forcibly drafted his teammate, Dr. Carl Mollis, as the guinea pig, which actually worked. With Mollis at his command, the Wizard and his team tried to take over New York, but what I failed to mention is that he was also suffering from dementia. At any point, the Wizard's mind could slip, freeing both Carnage and Mollis from his control, which of course, it happened. Outraged at being forced to do the Wizard's bidding, Mollis revolted, killing his former teammate Claw in the process. The problem there, though, is that Claw is a dude that's literally made out of sound, and when his containment suit was pierced, a huge sonic blast erupted from his body. Which, wouldn't you know, is one of the weaknesses of the symbiotes. That's why he was drafted to be on the team in the first place. Now removed from Mollis, Carnage bonded itself directly to the Wizard, and now with its new host, Carnage continued to wreck shop. That is, until Spider-Man brought out his secret weapon, the brain-dead body of Cletus Kasady, who Carnage happily jumped onto. Now, this part gets wild, so try to stay with me here. When Claw was killed, his atoms dispersed into the atmosphere, which, remember, are sentient sound. Although they would soon dissipate further, which would make him lose consciousness, Claw managed to pull himself together for one last hurrah, taking revenge for the Wizard by blasting Carnage with a sonic lightning bolt from the sky. This separated the symbiote from Cletus just long enough for it to be contained by Spider-Man, and finally, the day was saved. It's worth noting that at this point in time, Spider-Man wasn't quite himself. His mind had actually swapped with Dr. Octopus, which is a whole separate can of worms that needs its own video to explain. But trust me, it's a lot less confusing and is a lot more enjoyable to read than it sounds. Anyway, after capturing Carnage, Spider-Ock sent samples of it to various labs for study. One scientist was infected by her sample, it piloted her body, drained it of its nutrients, and kept leaping from host to host in search of Kasady. At the same time, though, there was this dude that wanted Carnage all for himself, so he killed Cletus, thinking that when the symbiote came for the body, then it would bond with him. Nope, Carnage actually just bonded with the corpse, which brought Kasady back to life. Because comics. Eventually, Cletus and Carnage would become separated once again, with the symbiote being locked up, and Norman Osborn used his vast resources to get his hands on it, becoming the Red Goblin. With their powers combined, Norman once again made it his personal mission to kill Spider-Man and everyone that he loves. And he also took this opportunity to kidnap his grandson Normie and infect him with Carnage, turning him into his own little minion called the Goblin Child. Red Goblin was a force to be reckoned with, causing incalculable amounts of damage, and even killing Flash Thompson, the man who used to be Agent Venom. Norman was only depowered because Peter made a brilliant attack at his hubris, convincing him that if Osborn had killed him while wearing the symbiote, then the world would attribute that kill to Carnage, not him. As such, Norman tore off the symbiote, and ultimately, that led to his downfall. Carnage then played a huge role in the many Venom stories written by Donny Cates, where he became the right-hand man of Null, the god of the symbiotes. Now, although this video is about everyone who's ever worn Carnage, I would be remiss to not mention the time that Carnage was trying to free Null, so he went against Hulk, who was wearing Venom at the time, and then ripped Venom off of the Hulk and wore Venom like a crown.
Well, gotta re-record this section thanks to technical difficulties.
In order to free Null from his prison, Carnage was collecting codexes, little bits of symbiotes that are left inside the bodies of their former hosts. Eddie was able to absorb a bunch of them, making a powerful new symbiote out of all these bits and pieces. With this new symbiote swarm, Eddie defeated Cletus by absorbing this Carnage-Venom hybrid into it, but the evil of Carnage still rose to the surface. Carnage's presence within the Hive started to take over the entire thing, but was separated from Brock in a fiery plane crash. Yet Carnage still wanted to bond with Eddie, so it hunted him down. Desperate to not merge with Carnage, Brock had to resort to chopping off his own hand to prevent it. Even without his hand though, the hunt continues. Carnage chased Eddie up a huge tower, which was struck by lightning, causing Carnage to be separated from Venom. Unconscious from the blast, Carnage bonded with Eddie, but thankfully Brock was saved by his son, who is a complicated character that I do not have time to explain in this video. All you really need to know is that he can do this to symbiotes. At the end of the storyline, Carnage was defeated, so he slithered away into the ocean, bonded with a shark, and once again hopped from host to host until it ended up on a guy named Arthur Crane. Not only is Crane very much like Cletus Kasady in that he's a sociopathic killer, but he's also the son of an anti-alien senator. Arthur's father hoped to capitalize on anti-alien sentiment in a bid to get supporters for a presidential campaign, but Carnage killed him in the middle of a rally to make Senator Crane into a martyr. With his father dead, Arthur became the new face of the anti-alien movement, considering that all of his father's supporters were whipped up into a frenzy following his murder. However, even though Arthur was defeated by Iron Man removing Carnage from him, Arthur was still allowed to work alongside Carnage and his cabal of evil symbiotes. And at the time of this recording, I'm pretty sure that's everyone who has ever been Carnage. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, why not consider subscribing, or even watching another one? And if you liked this, then you probably like Spider-Man stuff. So good news, I actually have a playlist with every single one of my Spider-Man videos in it. I think I did a pretty good job on them, so please, consider giving those a watch. But anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.